Hi, and welcome to Mansfield today. I'm Melanie Walker, handling it all on my own today, which is fine because I know more about gardening than Jeremy does. Now, we talk about gardening from many different points of view on this program. We talk about stuff that you can do in your own garden. We talk to people who are experts about specific things, and we talk about the bigger, well, the world being a big garden and how we need to start looking after the big gardens to make sure that we are actually going to be okay for the future to come and to keep gardens in place for the future generations. Now, we always talk about the Cape Floristic region because, they've got so many wonderful plants, Cape Tonians. Sorry, guys, I know that you are like very particular about your plants. We, however, here on the Highveld have the most incredible grasslands. And it's the second most important biome in southern Africa, okay? And in fact, probably across the whole of Africa and many other places in the world. Our grasslands, however, are diminishing due to things like what do you call it? Suburbanification. I'll get the right person to actually discuss how that word is said. It's a very long word. But to talk to us all the way from, well, just down the road actually, at the Sisulu Botanical Gardens, we have one of the curators from there, and that's Andrew Hanke from Sanby. How are you doing, Andrew?
Very well. Thanks yourself, Melanie.
I'm fabulous, and it's so good to see you after such a long time.
Yes,
Is Walter Sisulu up and running again in the way that it was? Are people coming and enjoying being in the gardens?
very much, very much. The garden is busier than it was before COVID. I think the lockdown has forced people to be more desire. There's more desire to go outdoors and find outdoor venues than there were before. So certainly, yes. And the hiking trails have gone absolutely crazy. We see so many people on weekends doing the hiking trail. Absolutely, there seems to be a trend. Hiking is the new trend.
Thank goodness for that. I believe that
Yeah.
walking is one of the best things you can do for yourself. Now, one of the things that you have at Walter Sisulu, which I know you set up, was this little mini grassland, which we have focused on for television productions before. Now,
Yes.
what goes into creating or actually being a grassland?
Well, the grassland biome is exceptionally diverse, and as you already mentioned, it's second in diversity only to the Cape Fynbos. And uh, obviously, Gauteng, we still have a lot of natural grasslands, although they're being transformed at a rapid rate. So, in order to try and create awareness among the garden visitors, and obviously because grasslands are such a rich and diverse biome, there's a lot of geophytes, plants, woody tubers, roots, a lot of underground organs. A lot of plants have underground storage organs because they're adapted to fire, and the uh, plants, a lot of them have attractive flowers, but they're often difficult to grow. So we put them into these grassland areas amongst the cycads, and because it's a fire climax vegetation type, I knew at some point I would have to burn it, but I was in those years I was very reluctant to burn it because I was afraid what would happen to the cycads. But eventually, after about 7 years, I decided, okay, let's just burn it and see what happens. Now, when we first created that grassland, we knew that there were about 18 of these cycads in that section. And so then we came to burning it. We put a fire through it, ravaged through, burnt all the leaves off, burnt all the stems. And lo and behold, when the rain came out, when the rain came, there were 33 cycads that were growing there. The stems had become completely buried under all the constant weeding and turning of soil, tilling of soil, which had been taking place in the gardening context. So the plants were still there, but they were not happy and they were not making new leaves. Whereas once we started to burn and create this grassland environment, the plants started absolutely flourishing, and we then introduced other grassland species as well. which in separate sections of the grassland. So it's a very exciting little project. It's an artificial grassland, so it's planted with plants from all over the grassland biome, not just necessarily from Gauteng. We do have a 300-hectare nature reserve, part of which is Egoli granite grassland, and part of it is what is now called Gold Reef Mountain Bushveld on the rocky ridges. So we do have natural grassland on the property which the public can access and enjoy. But these little patches are just a kind of a fun way of making grasslands gardenable. So we take a garden and we turn it into an artificial grassland. And we put all sorts of grass aloes and bulbs and pineapple lilies and arum lilies and dioramas, harebells. The list is endless. Watsonias, gladiolus. There's all sorts of species. Very nice flowering plants which grow in the grasslands, and it's very exciting because obviously, as you know, Joburg is a very dry climate in winter. So during the winter months, these grassland habitats are tinder dry. But as soon as you disturb the soil, as soon as you turn the soil over, you lose that grassland. So as soon as you plow it effectively, you lose that grassland. It's gone forever. We can never get it back again. We know of disturbed grasslands that were disturbed about 200 years ago near Haribespoort Dam that were disturbed by Mazalakatsi's tribes when they were migrating northwards. And those areas are still in a subclimax state. So they never, as far as we know, will recover in our lifetime, in our human time frames in any case. So we have one chance to conserve a natural grassland, and that is to retain it in its natural state and not disturb it. Once
By
you disturb
leaving it
it,
alone, essentially.
by leaving it alone and looking after it and protecting it, it's
Yeah.
the species diversity might never return, or if it does, it might take 500 or 1,000 years for it. We don't know. We haven't been have that amount of time behind us to know those things.
But talking about specific species, I mean, there was a couple of years back that whole thing where the people wanted to go and develop one part above the gardens with the Albertina Sisulu orchid, and managed to stop them from actually turning that entire area and losing one of the last little colonies of that particular flower.
Exactly, and that's the Albertina Sisulu orchid. It's the most threatened plant in Gauteng, and it's a critically endangered species. And there are only 4 locations left on Earth where we know the plants still exist, and 3 of them have less than 10 individuals. Whereas the Krugersdorp population, we just did a census now this year, and our latest census, we're looking at 225 individuals. So that's a viable population that can actually survive. So it's critically important that we conserve that area. And we're in discussions with the Mogale City Council as to how we can go about conserving the area, because, you know, the orchids have never been cultivated outside of their natural habitat. Nobody's ever successfully cultivated them. We have got efforts afoot to try and get them cultivated, but so far no success. So we're in discussions with Mogale City Council at the moment to try and find a way forward to conserve the area. You don't need to conserve the orchid. What you need to do is conserve the habitat that supports the orchid, and
Absolutely.
the orchid will conserve itself.
Okay, now
So
2
all
other
we need to do
things.
is protect the habitat.
Yep. Well, creating an artificial habitat is one way, and I know a lot of people in their backyards, they actually think, I want to create what was here, specifically in like Gauteng, Johannesburg. So having their garden as a wild grassland. Obviously, we wouldn't suggest that they burn it during the winter months unless they can do it very well controlled. But the other interesting thing is that we all talk about planting trees because we're losing trees at a rate of knots, be it from Shottobora or from people taking them down because of having to build things. But we shouldn't be planting trees willy-nilly all over the place, because that can actually threaten the grassland.
Exactly. It's all about balance and it's about being informed. So we need to inform ourselves and know what is the natural vegetation? What does it look like? How is it structured? And, running around planting trees is all well and good. I'm the biggest supporter of tree planting. I'm a horticulturist and a botanist, but I'm also a conservationist, and it doesn't help to start planting trees in pristine grasslands or even in semi-transformed grassland. What we really need to do is to try and preserve those grasslands and preserve the biodiversity that they support. A lot of the grasslands around Gauteng are already transformed. However, they still support a semblance of the original ecology. They might not support the complete ecology that used to be there before they were disturbed, transformed, but they could still support a semblance of that. So it's important to just, be more informed about where you're going to plant your trees. There's nothing wrong with planting trees, but don't be planting them in a grassland, because what happens in a grassland is it shades out the grasses. And the species which originally are supposed to occur there are all full sun dependent. They can't grow in the shade, so they immediately start to disappear
What are
out
some of
of
the
those
grassland
areas.
trees that people should plant here on the Highveld that would do best in our particular biome, regardless of whether we live in this urban forest or not?
Yes. Well, there are a couple of trees which are actually fire hardy that grow in the open grassland, but not many. One of them, for example, is the kippersol tree, the cabbage tree, Casonia spicata. Not spicata, Casonia paniculata, blue, the lovely, it's like a single stem with a lollipop on top, a cabbage. They often call them cabbage trees. That's a nice one as well. It's well known in gardens and available at many nurseries. Another one is Protea caphora, the sugar bush. Unfortunately, that is also not able to be cultivated. It doesn't tolerate being cultivated. So if you have it on your property, you need to protect it. Because you won't have any success. We often have people coming to the botanical gardens and saying, before I built my house, my stand was covered with Protea caphora, the half-felt sugar bush, and now that I've built my house and we want to plant those Proteas back again, well, it's too late. They've gone. They're very difficult. They're very sensitive to soil disturbance. So even if you take your existing proteas and start making lawn around them, invariably they die off. Other species that are also natural to the area, of course, is acacia, or what they now call Senegalia, caphora, the common hookthorn. So it's a common tree, but it's a wonderful, really wonderful garden tree. Produces nice shade, allows enough light through so that your ground covers and plants can grow underneath it without making too much heavy shade. There are a couple of other acacias, robusta, karoo. Um, there are smaller bushes like Transvaal blue bush. There are a whole list that we can recommend, Melanie.
So, what other way can people actually help to conserve our grasslands? Because we don't want to be seeing it all just taken out completely.
Yes. Well, of course, it comes down to respect. We need to respect other people's property. We need to not be dumping on grasslands. We need to not be spreading weeds, invasive weeds. We need to inform ourselves, become more aware. We're not saying that we should transform every single garden in Joburg into a grassland. However, we need to be aware of what the original vegetation used to look like in Joburg, in Gauteng, and appreciate it. It's actually a very enjoyable pastime to go flower watching in Gauteng. And if you go out into, the nature reserves, Klip Nature Reserve, anywhere in the Cradle, Groenkloof, there's a number of places around
Suikerbosrand,
Gauteng.
one of my favorites.
Suikerbosrand is absolutely fantastic. There are Marievale. There's so many places that one can go to just to enjoy the wildflowers. Normally we do that in the spring and early summer. because that's when you get the most wildflowers. But then in late summer, in the February, March, April, January, February, March period, there you start getting the late summer orchids that come through, and that's another whole fascinating group of plants to enjoy. So
Yeah, plant
it's
hunting is fun.
yeah. So there's so many wildflowers to find and learn, and there are wonderful field guides available these days, which makes it all accessible.
I think we should just get you to come and lead us through all of these plants and see what we're missing out on.
Yeah,
It's so
yeah,
difficult to
yeah.
spot a lot of them a lot of the time. Andrew,
Yes,
thank you
and
so much.
identification can also be difficult for the layman. But
Yeah,
these days, with technology and with the field guides available, it's so much easier than it was when I was a student.
yeah.
Then it was
And you
really
make it
difficult.
easy for us.
Well, of course, now you can capitalize because of the social media aspect of internet. You can capitalize on the knowledge of experts without actually taking up their time or knocking on their door.
Absolutely. And thank you
So it
so much
makes
for
it.
joining us. I mean, I'm passionate about the grasslands, as you know, and I hope that people do come through, if they're in Gauteng, to Walter Sisulu and come and have a look at the amazing work you've been doing there.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank
All
you.
right, and we'll catch up with you again soon. And of course, we'll be catching up with you with other stuff which is happening here on Mansfield today. Keep subscribing, keep liking, and tell your friends about it. We'll catch you next time.